Hi folks, I'm International Master John Watson and this is Ask the Master on ICC TV. The main idea of this show is to provide a forum for chess lovers to ask questions, and we can do so either in advance or you can do so right now on the chat on ICC, assuming you're watching on YouTube. There's the ICC chat on the right there. I'll generally give priority to questions that were asked in advance, or to ones that were asked last week that I didn't actually finish or didn't know. But I'll get to every question that I can. And the other thing to remember is I have more questions than I can fit into this time slot, so just be patient. Sometimes I get asked, why didn't you answer my question? And that's usually the answer. So how do you contact this show? How do you contact me outside of the chat channel here? The first and best way to do it is to send the question to my email address, askimwatson@chessclub.com. So that's ASKIMWATSON @chessclub.com. Let me just adjust something here. Okay, a little bit down there. We also have the Twitter channel, which is hardly ever used, but you could use it. It'd be fun. Hashtag AskIamWatson, and you can put a question there or a comment. Finally, you can send a question to my ICC handle, which is John L. Watson. In other words, message John L. Watson, send the question or comment. You can also simply chat with the other listeners while I talk and just exchange thoughts. There's no reason you have to specifically be asking me a question all the time. I think that makes it more fun if we're sort of a little community here. And I'll be looking at the chat periodically, like I am right now, to look for comments and questions, but it may take me a minute to notice them because I'm going to be looking at another screen to do sort of the main presentation of moves and answers. So ask about anything related to chess. A few areas that of my expertise are openings, which I've written about for 30 or 40 years, and chess strategy, leading players, history. Chess history is fun. Chess books and videos in particular. I was going to talk about that today briefly in response to a question, and anything else that comes into mind. So without further ado, and let me mention that the new indices to the openings that we used in previous shows is up on my Facebook page, John L. Watson. This time it's 3 words, L as in lion, John L. Watson. And also when you look at these YouTube lectures, which will be strung up on the right, all of the previous 20 plus lectures, you'll see that below them now are a list of the openings that were covered in that particular lecture. Not that we just talk about openings, but those are the things that I have been requested to put in there so you can remember when I talked about this line or that line. And so before getting to the questions that I've been sent, the new ones, and responding to the chat, I always talk about either corrections or additions to things that were done in the previous show. So the first thing I want to do is expand upon an answer to a chat question from last week. The question was, what do you think about the line? I think I gave a particularly bad answer to the second half of this question, or the second part of the answer was not very good. This line, C3, it has a great record in the database, he says. So I talked about the line I know most about, which is this one, the one that Peter Svidler beat Garry Kasparov in, which just tries to get castled and get the piece out, and of course if knight takes you have this queen a4 check move. So I talked about that, and someone asked about h3, and I really immediately thought, well, that doesn't do much, doesn't seem to achieve much, and then because it doesn't contribute to the position, but it's actually been played a lot. And here's the idea, at least the main idea, is to go into this old Copic system with bishop d3. And let's show you how that goes. I've got a game with that, actually. I've got a game up with that. So let me just show you that. Black plays there, for example, now threatening to take the pawn. And white plays here, defending the pawn. This is a very odd system against the Sicilian, which you can get in other move orders too. Danny Copic wrote a book about it, which is why it's called the Copic system, even though it's been played quite a bit over the years. Okay, so what's the idea? Well, just defend this, get castled, then move the bishop back, where it's on a nice square anyway, or pretty nice, and then play d4 and grab the center. So black is challenged to do something about a very simple plan. It takes three or four moves, 3 moves I guess, but he needs to have done something by that point. Now there are many ways to answer this. Sometimes people play e5 structures. The most common move of all is just g6, and then you have to decide again at this point what line you're going to play. And often you end up playing d5 after white plays d4. But in this game, since I can't go over all the possibilities, obviously, I was just going to show you a sample game where black plays that move, which I used to think was almost a refutation of this line, but I don't think that anymore. This is when it first sort of came out. Obviously, if white takes now, black's got beautiful control over the d4 square. He's even got a tempo on that piece, and he could also take with the knight. It's also good. In fact, it's quite good because of knight f4, I guess, come to think of it. But anyway, no one ever plays there. So the only way to really justify this, since that's a threat, is to play e5, which he does. And then black comes back and attacks this. And you can see this is becoming almost a French-like position, which is one reason I think it's fun for black to play this way. And white plays this move, and you might ask about e6. So maybe real briefly I should show an e6 move. It has been played. In fact, it's been played a lot, but I don't think it's very good at all. Now black has bunch of central pawns, and he's about to advance them. And white is nowhere near winning that pawn or winning that square, so the only idea of playing this way is to play here, with threats of checkmating with queen h5, playing knight takes h7, playing bishop takes h7, and playing knight here. But all those moves are answered by this move. Now that's protected, and white's only real tactical try here, otherwise black's just getting his pieces out, is to play this move, after which black takes, and white plays check and gets his piece back. But he's not a pawn up because he lost a pawn to begin with. So black plays this move, and white plays here. And I guess I don't want to go into a lot of detail here because this is just a short answer. That's why I put it first to a short question. But I wanted to say that black has won 16 of the top 18 rated games from this position, even with some higher rated people as white. So that's a very good sign. He plays either this move, and then the knight can't really get out easily, or this move, and it doesn't really matter if you can take here because black's got this big center and white's totally undeveloped and has that weakness, has light square weaknesses. Look at bishop here, for example. It's a big issue, and that pawn on c3 is not good. It blocks off the knight and it creates light square weaknesses. So actually it's not a huge advantage, but for some reason black wins with a small advantage. He wins every game practically. Alright, so in this game, I don't seem to be able to revert there. There we go. In this game, white played the better move, queen e2, just defending this, and maybe threatening e6 pretty soon, because after all, at least this time it's supported. So black stops that, and now you see the French defense kind of look. White castles. I'm not going to show you all the theory. And black plays that move. Now I think a really good way to meet a position like this is just this first, because it's a move you want to make anyway, and you might play g5, h5, and g4. Probably not, but it's worth it's nice to have that in, and you're ready to castle, and maybe play f6. And then if white plays a move like this, which is what he almost always does to play here, that's the idea of the Copic system, then one thing you can do is just sort of attack this way. If white takes that, you win a valuable center pawn, and you just stand better. Is that right? Do I have the timing right here? Actually, if he takes this, the best way to do this is this, preparing to take that. And the queen's going to lose a bunch of time for one thing, and there's also this idea here. So that's very strong compensation for the pawn. In fact, you're going to get the pawn back because he can't really afford to go slowly. For example, a move like this, you play takes, and now the c file is a problem because of this move. So white has to do something about that. I guess he's forced to go here. Now you have this move. So even though the queens go off, well, you're losing the rook at the end. I don't know if I should be showing you all these things, but that's kind of the idea. So I think this bishop e7, bishop here is a good idea. And if d4, you can even go ahead right away and play b4, attacking the pawn chain. So your queenside attack is very advanced. You also have the idea now of a5 followed by bishop a6. Once again, those light squares are an issue. Not sure if black's better here, but he's certainly at least equal. White's a long ways away from being able to attack. That's one way to look at it, because he doesn't have his queenside pieces out. So instead of that, black plays this. There's other moves too. Queen c7 is a pretty good move, but for reasons I haven't explained yet. Okay, and that puts extra pressure on this d4 move that's probably going to happen. Maybe it prepares to castle queenside sometimes. And black switches to that move, which by the way is the most common move instead of queen b6. I should have mentioned that. Just attacking this way, castling and playing f6 is the other common thing. So, so white plays there, he's preparing d4 since that square is covered. And black attacks e5 and white protects it just in time. Black castles. White has to get that piece out and he can't put it on d2 because that square is hanging. And maybe there's going to be a little bit of a knight here idea. And in fact, black reacts to that. I don't think he really has to. But he does. He stops knight b5. Black's got a comfortable position. I think white does too. It's probably equal. Often in these positions, white would rather play there, so he's going to lose a tempo that he's kind of, this knight no longer has very many good squares, so that's why white isn't better here. White does, after all, have space. He plays there so that he can move his bishop out without getting queen takes b2, and now black makes that standard break, which is the one I wanted to show you. So it's very French-like. You get that f6 move in. White has to take it, black takes. And I would call this about equal. It's a standard position for black. He has indirect pressure on this isolated pawn. This is, of course, a backward pawn, but it's very hard to get to. It's easier to defend. It's on the third rank. But the bishop's still bad. So black doesn't have the move e5 in yet. Black has a central majority, but white has very nice bishops. This is a good bishop. It's going to go to a nice square, and this is a good bishop because it has a lot of flexibility. So I'd call this about equal, but I'm always very comfortable as black in these positions. White develops, and black goes back. Now these are funny moves, a little bit. They're maybe not the best. That's a good move though because of that, and it's hard to stop that move as it turns out. So white tries to get rid of this, put pressure on the queen side, and black weakens this a little bit, but he gains time doing this and is able to get his pieces out faster. So white takes that outpost and wants to double rooks, but it's all a little slow. For example, this move right now is quite strong. Because if the queen starts moving over, you have things like just check and takes. And if he has to take, that queen's coming to a beautiful square. There are 3 pieces on that square, and the f-file is quite strong. So I think black's already better there. It's not huge, but it's definitely better. But he plays slowly first, still thinking about knight f4, but unpinning that knight just in case. And white makes a blunder, actually, even though white's actually the higher rated player here. And because he doesn't want to see knight f4. Black's slightly better anyway, I think. But, you know, a move like this, putting more pressure on knight f4, queen here so that you don't fall for that trap with that. And then I think this is a good move. There's several good moves, but this one's kind of nice, cutting off that square, maybe getting rid of the bishop. Probably knight c4 would be next. And I think you'll see that black's better if you take a look at this. So that's a game with the Copic system, and that explains why h3 is a logical move here, because white's planning to play here. And it also gives a good answer, I think. I think this whole answer with this is very aggressive. I like that. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to address, let's see some chats here. How was Copic as an author? Well, he's written several books. A lot of them are sort of instructional books. They aren't really the kind of books I read usually. And the Copic system book is fine, just because no one had written about that opening before. I haven't gotten too much out of Copic books. I don't think I'd actually recommend them, but some people like them. So I have a question. I play the French. I have a problem with the exchange variation. We've talked about this quite a bit already. Can we spicy it up a bit? Yeah, read Play the French 4. Excellent answer. But I will get to some chat questions. I want to cover some previous things first. I have a similar question with the Caro-Kann. Okay. The Caro-Kann exchange, yeah. Okay, which I recommend as white in my little repertoire. All right, let's go back to some other questions though from last week first. I'll get back to that. I was asked about must-read books for the ambitious player in the chat last week. I just wanted to say, and I want to talk about books, not really this week, but I want to sort of introduce that subject. I think we should talk more about it. Now, a must-read book for the ambitious player would presumably be one that showed him or her how to improve in some way that other books don't show. And I'm not sure there are such books. So just to explain that, I think there's many good endgame books, but none of them really stand out as something you need to have. It's really a question of need, because there's plenty of books on it, and there's no book that's so much better than other ones that if you don't read it, you're going to be really suffering. Same thing with middle game books. There's ones that they definitely books make you better players, but if there was a book that really gave somehow the secret to playing middle games, then every teacher would use it. It would have caught on by now. So the important point is that any book will help you. If you, even poor books will improve your play if you put serious and critical study into them. But one thing is that in my experience, the more ambitious the claims are about a book, probably the less reliable it is, or at least the publisher has gone crazy saying things about it that aren't really true. So don't believe in hype about improving your game by hundreds of points immediately and becoming a grandmaster or even becoming a master. It's really just, there's no shortcuts. You just simply have to play as much as you can and study as much as you can, and you're likely to improve. And it never hurts to have a teacher. So perhaps a more interesting subject, I think, would be just favorite books. What are my favorite books? What are your favorite books? And I won't start that this week because there's an awful lot of other things to cover, but I'll be taking suggestions in the chat right now, even if you want to. Hey, there we go. Jerry Silman's a great author, and we can talk about specific books of Jeremy Silman also. And I'll maybe work on a list, too, of some of my favorite ones. But if you want to message me at John L. Watson, or if you want to send an email to askimwatson@chessclub.com, you can mention some books and ask me my opinion of them, or just mention that they're your favorites, and we'll talk about. I'd like to talk more about books. Okay, here's a new question I want to get to. I have a problem with black with this line. Let me show you the line. Do I have a game with this? Maybe I have a game, so I should throw that up there. Yes, I do. Okay. Let me do this. So here's a Caro-Kann question for the Caro-Kann person. It's this line, and a lot of these are regular lines. I know Queen E2 is suggested in the Knight C3 book. It's a funny thing to play. And here he plays Queen F3. Okay, so threatening to win a pawn on D5, and he says I have a problem with this line. The idea of Queen G3 is very strong, which was a little mysterious to me at first, but now I think I know what he means. There's quite a few lines where Queen G3 is a good move. What do you suggest? Well, the first thing is I'm amazed how many games there are with this. I found over 1,000 games, and that's not even in my biggest database. So black should have a concrete idea against this, I suppose, if you're a Caro-Kann player. I'm going to show a fun game because people might not really understand what white's doing, and then mix in some suggestions for black. The first thing, though, to realize for white is that he's trying not to make too many pawn moves. He's going to use piece play. And the obvious answer here, now, this is played a lot. It's considered okay. Black can play knight here and then knight here. I don't think it's any more than equal. I think white gets perfectly good play. In fact, this whole line is kind of fun for white. But I don't think white gets any advantage against that or the line I'm going to show you. There's the natural move, right? Kick the knight. But you're losing time. And the whole point of Queen F3 is to play this move, get another piece out. And then if you do play the knight back here, you aren't blocking the bishop off. So in the meantime, you're threatening, well, it isn't mate yet, but it's extremely strong. And you can imagine that you can't afford to take this knight because of check followed by, for example, taking this way. And then you have threats on e6, f4, and rook d1, and it's just too much. So black has to do something else, and that means defend the f pawn. So that's fairly natural, but these positions are kind of comfortable for white. They're pretty easy to play, and he is 3 pieces ahead in development. That's sort of interesting. And the move that where his piece is going to go. I think black's okay here. I looked at some lines, but he has to be a little careful, and it's not maybe that much fun. So the move that's not always supposed to be so good is the one that he plays here. Oh, in fact, I wanted to show you something. If knight here, whoops, sorry, this is after e6. I think one of the things that the questioner might be talking about is this move immediately, which stops the bishop from defending. Stops the bishop from defending g7. And then he's got moves like this, and bringing the bishop out, maybe just bringing the knight out, or even f4 in some positions, although not usually. Usually you want to play d3 here. And then probably just knight f3, just get your pieces out. Keep your lead in development. And the idea is that it's a little awkward for black to develop his pieces. That position may favor white slightly. So that was kind of one of his points. So in this game, I'm looking at that move instead. And now white always plays this move. It's the only really consistent move. I think this has been very unimpressive. It's got just a terrible score. It's probably not that bad. And this move is usually played. And white plays the Queen G3 move with the sort of double idea. But it turns out that in this position, black just has a space advantage here, and he's about to expand on the queen side. Like maybe something like a4 should be played, but then you always have to worry about the fact that, oh wait, this is hanging, sorry. So you got to play d3 first, right? Yeah, d3. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, d3. Oh yeah, and then this, believe it or not, this very aggressive approach is quite good because you're thinking about c4, and if he takes, you've got a knight e4 just wiping out his center. So this is quite a good position for black, I think. I mean, it's not a huge advantage, but surprising that this is a problem. Now, of course, that isn't forced at all, but and white's equal after e5 for sure, and it hasn't even done that badly. But I think this move, which I didn't find any examples of, is quite a good solution. Of course, the computer always helps, but I remembered in my mind that when I was looking at this might be a good move, and it's a problem. Now if you try to stop the move knight e5, something like this, then this is my fault. I'm mixed up here. Yeah, this is my fault. We already looked at this line. This is my fault. Yeah, this one, he can't go queen g3 because of takes, and you're also threatening this. And it turns out there's no real easy way to meet that. So this is a good line. It's not the one I was thinking of, but this is a good line because you get rid of that and ruin his pawn structure. Well, wait, that's winning a pawn. Oh, in fact, this is even better because you can play check here. Another cute little trick. The idea is that if this, which is the only really reasonable move, then you win a pawn at least temporarily that way, and you've ruined his pawn structure too. So, sorry about that. So I didn't want to show you knight d7 there in particular, but it's pretty good. I wanted to show it to you after this e5 move, which is the one they played in the game. And now I think knight d7 is a very clever move. After this, white probably is going to take that. Really, there's not much else. If here, now that's what I was going to show you. If he takes there, then black just gets his pieces out really nicely. Something like this. And black's got slightly the superior pawn structure. White's not even ahead in development. This is equal. It's very easy for black. He just plays here. And white also can't really prevent this bishop d6 idea. So black's going to get his pieces out very easily. For example, here, and after bishop e3, where else really? Because there's knight h5 after bishop a. Where else that can keep you on that square? This is good because he can't really take it, because it's just going to be murder somehow. I think. Oh yeah, okay, we can trap the queen. I think that's all forced. You can go back and look at that. There may be a trick for white, but I seriously doubt it. There's other ways. There's always some way to exploit that anyway. So there goes white's idea with queen g3. So what would he play instead? Well, he would have to take. He'd have to capture there. And then black has this nice move, knight e5. And let me see, what have I written down here? Probably the best move is queen g3 now. This is very simple here, and after you capture, if he takes here, trying to get a new queen, sure, white wins a pawn, probably wants to take back this way, but black has two bishops and terrific attack. This is more than enough for a pawn. You wouldn't want to be white here. I mean, if white starts moving over somewhere, you even have moves like queen d5 attacking this, and you got rook g8 coming, and the bishops are just almost worth a pawn. And this is hardly a very good pawn anyway. So this is a great position. You can go over that again if you don't believe that. And so I think e5 knight d7 is quite a great move here. What else can you do? If he takes and plays somewhere else, do we try something else? Queen g3, I guess. You just take back here because you're on two pieces. You're on this one and this one. And I think this time you're not even losing material. Here, there. White's not too badly off here. I mean, you could play this, but I think I'd rather be black here. Just play this next. This is playable for white, and the whole line. White can find ways of getting an equal game, I'm sure, but so that means it's okay for white to play actually. But I just wanted to show you that black's pretty comfortable here, and that's pretty much an answer, I think. Yeah, that's pretty much an answer to the question that I was asked, and here's the game. The game is actually fun for white, and this has happened numerous times, this position, where black got greedy and took that. He shouldn't. He should just take back here. I think. You're just falling too far behind in development. You can now take the other way, and that hasn't worked very well either. So black Black is okay after e takes f6. I'm not going to go back and show you that because, as usual, there's a time issue. We've got a lot of things to go over, and we've got the chat coming up too. So white plays there. He doesn't have to. He could castle first, but there's no other way to protect against mate. And now white castles, and he's threatening to move that. It's even better maybe to play knight here and castle kingside, as it turns out, because at least black can try to counterattack now. But I think white has much more than enough. That's an odd move, but you can kind of, he needs to be able to move this knight without allowing bishop takes e6. It's just an awkward position. He probably should try something else, but it's not clear what. For example, there's even sacrificial themes. Like, what if he plays this natural move here to try and weaken white's the side of the board that white's queen is on? White can actually even play this ridiculous sequence here because he's so far ahead in development. And all of a sudden, it turns out black's completely lost because of this threat. And there's just too many things happening. Discoveries with the bishop, rook coming over. It's a funny position. I could show you a little more there, but it's a winning position. So in the game, he plays this funny looking move, which allows for knight d7 or something like that. And white plays there. I don't think that's the best move. I think knight f3 is tremendously strong. Just keep in terms of development. Just keep in with development. Rook over, and pretty much the game's over. This is a little slow. Black had a chance to kind of sneak out, but with a slightly worse game. That wasn't a very good move. And white plays a very odd move here. Black should now play here, but white's looking for this tactic, which is after that he plays here, attacking that. And there's no really good answer to that. So I won't go into much detail here, but anyway, black captures that, and now of course this is a problem. White gets his pieces out quickly. Now rook d1 was a good move, but so is this, because you're thinking about just sneaking into that square. And black captures, and you notice that with a knight on c4 there's threats like rook f7, queen f7, and then knight d6 check. Anyway, it's a fun game. This is just one of those silly tactical games. Rook takes wasn't necessary either, but white's much better here. And pretty soon he just slaughters him. That's a cute move though. That's the best move of the game because there's a lot of knight f5 sacrifices. It also stops black from cutting off the d file. It's an excellent move. That's a nice one. Needless to say, white doesn't want to exchange queens because he's trying to checkmate. And there you go. Now you've got threats down the d file, so black tries to block it off, but look what happens there, and it's really all over. There's threats of this, and there's nothing to be done. Maybe I won't finish this. Well, actually, it does go on a little bit. Maybe I should. There was a way to protect that. Pretty pathetic, but at least a way to protect it. And you can see everything's just getting looser and looser. And white just transposes into an endgame. This is weak. This is weak. White's a pawn ahead, has two passed pawns over there. Oh, he's two pawns ahead, excuse me. So, okay, enough of that. Let's get to the chat. We have, let me see what's going on here. I play the French exchange variation. How can I spice it up? Now, it's possible I should answer that next time because it's such a complicated question, and there are 3 or 4 ways to do. And you can also go back to previous lectures. Maybe I can answer it more thoroughly at one point or another. But the one problem is this: that after you've played the exchange variation, white has this move, if he wants to allow a winnower. He has this move, which is pretty common these days. This move, which is in some ways the most dangerous move. That's what Kasparov played. And this move, which is the traditional move. And actually even this move, which has been played, was even popular for a little while as a supposed drawing weapon, which I don't believe. But so there are ways to spice it up. You might want to get my book. I don't want to push my books too hard, but I have a complete repertoire against all of the exchange variation ideas for white, and you can always imbalance it. That's the idea. If you think about this position, you can always make it spicy, and the reason you can always make it spicy is because both sides have all their pieces left, and there's only one pawn exchange. That means the whole game's ahead. So the idea that the exchange variation is drawish has been refuted again and again and again. It just isn't true. There's plenty of ways for black to, and most black players of the French, the good players have very good records as black and very few draws. So. And of course, you occasionally lose a game too. And white too. If white's getting more sophisticated, there are some players that play the exchange French as white now. Some good players, better players than used to, and so they've got some ideas too, and they don't mind it being unbalanced. They're happy to go into a complicated game. But the real point is it can be complicated. It's not simple. The exchange Slav, I just don't know enough about. It always kind of made me mad about the Slav. I was never thrilled about facing the exchange Slav. The top players really don't care because they've got all the lines kind of worked out to, a lot of times you play another move before you exchange, but for example, this line for a long time looked kind of dangerous. Rook c1 ideas, knight b5 ideas, and that's a good way. But there's all kinds of answers that have been found to that. The main line, one of the main lines, used to be this bishop b5 thing, where both sides bring out their knights, and then black they bring out their bishops. And now what black does a lot of times these days is plays a6 to unbalance things. So I would recommend looking at the lines with a6, by the way. And you can even play it the move before, by the way, which transposes, I think, into a Cherbanenko if you play it right now. So a6 is a move to look into because white can't always imitate it, especially after this, for example, because you won't play. I'm sorry, especially after if white plays a move like bishop f4. Let me get this in. Well, this, for example, and if you play a move like this now, well, the bishop's there. You don't have to. You can keep the bishop here. It turns out that often the bishop's as well placed on d7 as white's is on f4. So, I mean, I don't have enough advice here. I'm not an expert on it. My friend Cyrus Lactowal and I have been over a bunch of the more critical lines, but he knows exactly what orders he likes and don't like. I was going to mention that the traditional bishop b5 line is also considered okay now. This line's okay. I think you can even go back into this, but more common are other ways to play it. Queen b6 ideas. And anyway, everything's equal if black knows what he's doing. I think that's the answer. On the other hand, it's pretty boring, isn't it? And white can play this, I think, in order to get a kind of boring symmetrical game, unlike the exchange French. So, if you're a skilled player, you're going to outplay your opponent anyway, for sure. All the pieces are left on the board, so you'll be fine. But as white. But it's just not as easy as in some other openings to really mix it up if your opponent knows what he's doing. All right. What do you think of the berry attack? I think we talked about it once. It's too difficult to say what I think about it in a way, but the berry attack is plain. It's like the Veresov, except you play bishop f4. Now you can play it right away. We looked at that a few weeks ago. Whoops, that was Yobava, I think, who played that. The berry attack is like this, and then if this, for example, if g6, you play bishop f4. A lot of times black plays moves like c6, white plays here. And then a system I kind of like for black is going to this move, bishop g4. And the idea is I know this sounds kind of long term, but the idea is to play bishop here, knight here, castles, maybe rook e8, but you get the move, you take this, and your knights turn out to be pretty good. It's like a good Schlechter Slav. It's a better Schlechter Slav than you usually get, and the Schlechter Slav isn't that bad. So you force the move e5, even if you have to play rook e8. And I think it completely equalizes, and you've got plenty of winning chances. So that'd be my recommendation against the berry with g6. Now there's also the berry without g6, I guess, right? Which would be something like, got me. I used to play it with g6 as black, so now I can't remember. I mean, maybe if black played here, you'd play here and just sort of ask black what he was doing. There's ideas of knight b5 sometimes. What do I think of it? I think it's almost undoubtedly equal, but that it doesn't. Black has enough easy systems against it that give him, decent play, that it doesn't appeal to many people as white. It's supposed to have. I mean, the idea is to have surprise value, I think. That's not a very good answer, but that's a start. If you're King's Indian player, that's definitely a way to play it. They're the one I just showed you with the bishop g4 system. I've got some of writing about the berry and solutions in some of my books with Eric Schiller, including that most. I think we have it in our most recent book too. I'm pretty sure we have it in our Taming the Wild Chess openings. And if it's not, and it's in a couple before. Do you have a problem with the pan-off attack or bishop d3, c3? Now we've talked quite a lot about the pan-off. Oh, I see. He's asking the other. Yeah, I have a similar question. The similar question was for double. Was for exchange without the pan-off, I think. Let's look at that. So. Oh, I'm sorry. What am I doing talking about the Slav? Well, that's a separate question you can have. I should have been talking about the Caro-Kann. Excuse me. I had scrolled down already and forgotten. Okay, so here's the Caro-Kann exchange. That's different. That's different because it's unsymmetrical. Look at the difference here. White's e-pawn's gone and black's c-pawn's gone. So already it's unsymmetrical, which means that you're going to have no trouble having an interesting unbalanced game. Yeah, and it's a good question. You talk about the pan-off, which is not really an exchange variation. And we've talked about that quite a bit, the pan-off in various forms. you know, black's okay if he knows what he's doing for sure. Or are you talking about c3? And I suspect he's talking about the c3 lines, which would go bishop d3 first. If you play c3 immediately, I think you're going to run into this. You don't want that because the bishop really belongs here. So almost everyone's going to play bishop d3 first, and then if a move like that here. And now I recommend this as white in my my ICC lectures as a repertoire, e4 repertoire for white. And because it's fun. It's basically a Queen's Gambit reversed is one way to look at it. For example, a line like this, you're getting a, for example, this one would be, if you think about it, a reversed Queen's Gambit. I'll let you contemplate that for a second. And black can have fun with this because the bishop's already here, which is a little bit, you know, usually it's there and then often it moves there next. So white, in a way, you could almost argue is 2 tempi up, and aims for a kingside attack usually. The other main move, which is given in most of the books these days, is this, because of this idea, I'm sorry, is what is white doing first? Oh, not knight f6, sorry. Is black playing immediately here to stop bishop f4, which, by the way, is the Fischer idea. For example, this move would be played. Not just Fischer's, but everybody's idea. And that stops e5 and stops queen c7. And and now you can still play like a Queen's Gambit. You can still play for knight f3 and knight here and castles and rook e1. So I'm sorry, that's the main line, by the way. That's one of the main lines. So that's why black plays this a lot, to stop bishop f4 and also support e5. And it's funny how early you can play e5. It's another example of how an isolated pawn, because white's going to take that and this is going to be isolated, is absolutely fine for black because he has space and activity. You'll see that in many variations of this. But on the other hand, white can play it too. And you can take a look at my well, you can take a look at books and see how white might try and set up. The other thing white can do to avoid all this, which I mentioned in my video, is to play this right away, just to avoid queen c7. It has other small disadvantages, though, so it's not a complete solution at all. All right. Someone's complete book of chess strategy. Yeah, you know, it sells incredibly well. Jeremy's always astonished by that because he's written all these sophisticated books for the maybe 1400 to 2000 player or 1200 to 2000 player, and then this is the book of chess strategy. I mean, he likes the book, but I don't think he considers it one of his better books. It's a bit of a list. Interesting that you like that, but a lot of people do, so you're in good company. Okay, type Ben Feingold beginner beatdown, and you have a line against the boring Caro-Kann line. Okay, and there are plenty of books. Every Caro-Kann repertoire book tells you how to play against it, so you're okay. I can't stand Feingold. That's terrific. Okay, let me see. Wow, here we go. Oh yes, Watson always does a great job. I absolutely agree. All right, to each their own. I find him repulsive. I hope that's Feingold, not me. Thank you. French exchange, yes. And I think what I'm going to have to do with the French exchange, since I'm asked that fairly often, is devote maybe a couple lines every time. You know how I always do some serious analysis on this show. I'm still hoping to get to the Evans Gambit and some other stuff. Okay, by John. I'll put some detail in to the exchange French at some point. I'll never be able to answer the whole question. It's just too broad. It's a whole. That's like asking what to do against knight c3 in the French. I mean, there's a million. It's way too long an answer. All right, so let me get back because there's tons of this stuff. I wanted to talk about. Okay, that was the queen f3. Oh, someone asked me about queen e7 on the second move. And let me just show you a game with that, because I didn't get a chance to answer that. So I'm really trying to kind of reward people that have already asked questions and make sure that I don't skip over them and that people aren't left hanging. I'm just going to do it by showing a game. Now there's plenty of ways to do this. What black's usually trying to do when he plays queen e7 in this position, I've got a lot of e4, e5 stuff in the next few weeks, is that he's going to play kind of a Philidor setup with this, and possibly here. For example, if white plays here, threatening knight d5 in some lines, black often plays that, maybe not immediately, but he can play that. He plays that very soon, then here, and maybe knight here, and maybe g6 and bishop g7. So it's a Philidor setup with maybe a little bit better bishop on the diagonal, not so passive on e7. That's kind of the thought. And of course, white has space, and white gets his pieces out quickly, and so white should be better. And that's my conclusion, is that it isn't really that bad. but and it hasn't been played a lot on a high level, but it has been played by 2,400 plus players as black. And from the games, I think you can say that white definitely doesn't have an outright refutation, but he can almost always force some kind of advantage against it with good play. He should get some sort of advantage with a lead in development, basically. Let me show you this game. That plays that because maybe c3 is coming. And this has been played. The reason I chose this one is because it's been played quite a bit, even by some good players. And with that idea. Now the other ideas are, as I mentioned, g6, bishop g7, knight f6, and maybe c6, and castles. That's the solid way to play. But since I can only show one game, I thought I'd show you this, which has a similar idea, which is controlling these two squares in the center. And it's been played by, as I say, better players. So black just develops, and then sure enough, he holds that because he's hoping that g4 would be a weakening move. And if he takes, it's just too early to give up the two bishops. Maybe he'll take it later. So white tries to blast away in the center, and black plays that move I was talking about, just covering key squares. White develops. I'll just make some moves here. Now he gets out of the way and decides to move the bishop here after all. But he's actually got another idea too. And you'll see what that is. It's actually going queenside, I'll just tell you. And this position has occurred quite a few times. And in one game, white ran around over there to g3, and I think that also gives an advantage. Typical Roy Lopez idea, right? Or Joko Piano with d3 kind of idea. And then he came back. And I don't know how much more I need to show here. Okay, this is Fashir Lagrave, which is one reason I want to mention this as white, and how he played it. And black made a mistake here. It turned out this is now sound. Taking here next, after black takes here, or taking here. So that went wrong quickly. But in this game he played here. And black defends against g5 and thinks about playing g5 himself. So that's maybe a scary plan if you're white. But you may think it's kind of silly, but there are ideas of playing h5 and g4, or maybe rook g8 and g4, all of which makes sense if you're going queenside, which is what his plan is. Now that's not the only move at all. I think h4 is very interesting, but it's not the end of the game. So it just develops a piece. Now it seems like other moves are better. I think just go right ahead and play this move and put pressure on that side of the board is a good way to play. And if he castles, you go here because there's no capturing here. Now there is. You can look at it, but if he captures there, he ends up getting in trouble because of the f5 square. It's not absolutely simple. Bishop takes e4. You simply take knight takes e4 and knight f5. You want a piece. And knight takes e4. I think this knight is a good way to play. Threatening e7, and he has to play here to defend both his knight here and his bishop there. But now taking is just too strong. Yeah, actually this is kind of doomed because if he plays here, you've got discovered check, double attacks, discovered checks, and this one I think just loses to takes. Takes and queen f3. I'm thinking might just win a piece. Yeah, because you have g4 also. Okay, just so you get a feel for it. What he played in the game, I think is a little worse, a little slower, but black plays maybe not so convincingly either. He should just castle queenside, which is what his plan supposedly is. This way he weakens that square, and of course knight e3 is always good too. Let's just keep going here. I've got a line on d5. d5 is probably better than queen f3 according to my analysis, but so what, right? Let's make a few more moves. Oh, look how weakened black's structure is. And unless I'm going to use up the entire rest of the show, I probably should pretty much stop here. Played there, attacking there, and then I think he expanded on the queen side. I can make a few more moves. Could expand on the queen side. Plays there first. Actually, black's not that terribly off here. He's still sort of in the game. Let's just keep going. Let's see. I'll just go quickly. Voids the rook exchange because he thinks he stands better positionally, so why bother? And nice move. Cutting off good squares. What happens finally is these pawns get weak in the endgame. Might even be worth seeing. Let's just make some moves. These are good players, so they're probably not dropping any material if that's what you're worried about. Oh, so now he takes the endgame, and that's a nice move. Why is that a nice move? Because it's going here, and then there's going to be bishop c3, and this pawn's going to fall. As it turns out, there's nothing black can do about that. He can stall around and make some threats and do this or that, and he does try that, but white centralizes his king and eventually just wins that e-pawn. So a kind of nice positional game, just because he created these weaknesses and took another 20 moves to figure out what to do about them, and won the game. That's kind of cool. All right, so what do we have next? We have the Pearts is pretty good. The 150, yeah, I think the 150 is a pretty good line. I have more respect for the Pearts than... If you look at lifetime Pearts players, grandmasters, they actually do pretty well. No one seems to be able to crack their opening. That book by James Vegas really was impressive to me. The Pearts is black and white, and then he followed it up with something called the Developments in the Pearts, which took the same lines and brought them up forward a couple of years. Can you do D3 Berlin? Yeah, I guess it's funny that people even call that the Berlin. To me, the Berlin is, you play knight f6 and then you take knight e4, but yeah, you can play d3. We've looked at a bunch of d3 positions already. You want to go back into previous lectures. It's also a really hard question. I'll look at it next week. I'll talk about it a little next week. The reason I can't do it this week is because it's a huge answer. Look at this. Nothing's happened yet. This is at the beginning of the game, and there's thousands of games, so I can't really cover the whole thing. And I will, some ideas. I'll show you next time about some ideas. Pretty much my students all play, even after bishop c4, they all play d3 now, because the other lines just aren't very impressive or fun. The Pearts is pretty weak. I'm from Slovenia, because Pearts was apparently from Slovenia. I didn't actually know that. I think of him as Yugoslavian, but specifically Slovenia. Here we go. I know, but what's best against it? Against what? Against the Pearts? No, he's asking about the 150. Wait a minute, he's asking about what? Is 150 a good choice? Yeah, it is a pretty good choice. You can also do something kind of interesting that's worked really well for my students and other people, and maybe we even talked about it, is playing an early bishop g5 against the Pearts. I think it's underrated. And it's in my ICC lectures. I assume most of you are ICC members, so you can go in there and just look at it. I give 3 or 4 or 5 lectures about these positions and playing bishop g5. It's a fun line and active, and I would really recommend it. And people don't know it as well as they do the 150 attack. We talked a little about the 150 before. I'll try and mention it next week again. Once again, it's something you have to show an awful lot about, but it's good that you're putting these in there, because I will get to them. It's just I don't really have time right now to cover something that broad. Some more general questions. Hi John, I brought your package for opening repertoires. I'm approximately 15-15. I was curious if you would suggest that I should just watch the videos, or if I should watch and enter the moves into chess space at the same time. Seems like I waste my time by trying to enter everything into chess space exactly right. Any thoughts? Okay, that's a good question. Now, first, I wanted to say, if you go to the archive of these lectures on ICC, that's for you ICC members, you'll see that towards the end I put a PGN database with the main games that I covered for some of them. And that makes it really easy for you, because you can just add to the games. You've got the games, you can just add the notes, and that's a lot easier than putting all the main moves down. So in other words, if there's 3 main variations of the Pearts, I put all 3 of them into the PGN files. Unfortunately, that's not true of all the series. That's true for the Queen's Gambit Accepted and Declined, the Slav, and the Trompovsky. But it's not true, for example, for the English Defense, the French, and the Chigorin. So I'm afraid you would have to enter those into chess space. Now, you can save some time and also get extra information if you put the main moves of the variation I'm talking about into chess space on a new board, and then rather than entering all of the analysis and subvariations, rather than going on and on and on, you use the search function to locate a game or game. You just do search on some position from one of those variations that includes the beginning move, say, of the subvariation, or the move you want to see about. And you'll usually find the analysis I'll give you in some game, but if not, you're going to find things that are similar. What you do then is you use the merge function, which is the games are going to be sitting on one side of your board, and your moves are going to be sitting on the other side, the moves of the main game. So what you do is you just drag them one into the other, and it merges them and puts them in the right place. And this goes very quickly once you're used to it. So you can leave the whole games inside your old game and save it, or you can edit it first, maybe cut down on the games and just keep the opening part, or add notes. Do whatever you want to. So that will definitely save you some work, and it should be a little easier. And the great thing about entering moves yourself, though, even if you have to do them slowly and manually, is that all my students tell me that they learn better when they do that. They get more out of things when they actually have to enter the moves in rather than just passively listen to me drone on. That's the idea. What's better to study, Vienna or Queen's Indian? Yeah, Vienna is a particular part of the Queen's Gambit, so you aren't always going to get that. You very, very often are not going to get the Vienna game. I assume that's what you mean. Um, the only Vienna in D4 openings that I know, I think, is the Vienna variation of this. But of course, you're never, you have to get this position. So White has to make certain moves. For example, White has to commit to knight f3 to get this position, for example. And eventually you get this kind of thing. For example, this is this sort of thing. And White has a million options. That's the old main line, and there's all kinds of things that can happen here. There's one cute thing that can happen here that's been happening recently. That I'll show you this for White. And Mahmoud Yarov played this, for example, and he's almost 2,800, so he's not going to play it if it's completely unsound. But it is a gambit, and it's very interesting because looking at it, I kept getting games that maybe White had some winning chances. I mean, if Black played perfectly, White seemed to have some winning chances. It's a very fun gambit. I think the only reason it hasn't caught on, it did catch on briefly at the very top, and now it's more like lower players are using it. I think at the very top, Black had solved it enough so that he could draw a boring game, even if he was worse, because those top guys can draw games that they're worse in. That's my theory anyway, because I think it's worth trying for White. Sorry about that, because you want to play Black. Then the other thing, but the problem is White has so many options against this stuff, but because he doesn't have to play knight f3 for one thing. So Queen's Indian also you can't get by force, obviously, but at least you can get it if you play this move. If they play knight f3 now, you can play a Queen's Indian. I hope I'm getting this right, by the way. I mean, I'm not sure if this is what the question really is, but I think the question is, sure, you can play the Queen's Indian, but you have to get to this position. I mean, for example, if he plays here, you've got Nimzo Indian issues. You can't really play Queen's Indian now because of this, and that's just too good for White. Or I mean, it gives White a definite advantage. Nimzo Indian's the main move, so you could play that. You can also go back into a Queen's Gambit declined, and of course you have to face things like the exchange variation, and then you can't get your Vienna, obviously. So it's a lot of move orders. If it was as simple as being able to play one line or another against d4, everybody would do it, but it's unfortunately you have to know a lot of lines. The other thing White can do, of course, is g3 and play a Catalan kind of position. So that's a problem too, because now you can't play b6. Those are all easily solvable problems, but you have to do a little study to get them. Okay, so you do play the Nimzo. Okay. Yeah, so what else do you have to know? Well, you also have to know what happens if they don't play c4, right? You have to be prepared for these moves. Whoops, sorry. And both the Tory and the London system. And we've looked at those. If you go back to our last few shows, you can take a look and see what I recommended for Black against those. There's an awful lot to look at, but yeah, I think the Queen's Indian is fine. Probably better than the Vienna. Vienna's pretty limited. You have to memorize a lot of stuff, and I think it's kind of boring after a while, because Black has to play. It has all these must moves, and they all lead to draws. If you look at Gustafsson's repertoire, he's got draws just again and again and again and again, like forced draws, perpetual checks, and things like that. And I think it's hard for Black to win. I don't know. I don't like recommending such totally forced lines. It's sort of like the poison pawn Najdorf or something. I just feel like it's probably okay, but limited. All right. So how are we doing here? Ooh, getting close. What to play against the Pin Sicilian? Wow. You think I'm going to remember this? This goes way back. I haven't taught the Pin Sicilian. Let's take it. I mean, it's White I did in the old days, but okay. So Pin Sicilian. Let's try it this way. It doesn't really matter which way you do this. Now, the Pin Sicilian goes here first. Now, remember, if e5, you have Queen a5 check, everybody, winning that pawn. So White usually plays here. And then we've looked at this, of course, and then you can have either 4-knight Sicilian or even a Sveshnikov it can go to. Very common move. This is very unusual because all the theory eventually comes down to a better game for White. And here's I don't think there's any shortcuts in the Pin Sicilian. I mean, obviously White can play various moves, but I don't think there's any reason besides this that people don't play it. Now it turns out knight d5 I think is probably more accurate than knight e4. Knight e4 you play this move and queen g4. And there's this problem with this pawn, and there's tons of theory on it. I think knight d5, let me think about this. Seems to me Pin Sicilian people play this move now. And a lot of times White just plays here. Now why doesn't he like queen here? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. You think this would be, boy, bad memory here. You might be able to help me as we go along here. If takes, you always have to look at that move. Okay, that's an idea. This is an interesting move. And if he goes away, he can't defend the dark squares on the king side. Oh yeah, I think I remember some of this stuff now, because now moves like bishop h6 start getting very, very good. This position is extremely good for white. He probably just tries to win this, some move like that, for example. And so black should play this move, just defending, going back and defending. And I think this position is considered better for white, if I remember right. And I'm sorry about my memory. Now knight e4, what's the difference? Knight e4 we have, you can contribute by the way in the chat, since I'm getting everything wrong here probably. But if you study all these lines, you find out that white's doing well. Now you can just take this immediately. Maybe we should look at that first. And then a3, there we go. Okay, then a3. This is it. And then if he tries to win your piece, there's knight here check, which doesn't work very well, and there's knight here. And it all looks good for black, who is a piece ahead, except it just turns, or maybe bishop g5 first. Could be bishop g5 first. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think that's it. And then bishop h6, and you can never play f6 because there's checks on the diagonal. The light squares get too weak. So okay, look at this line. Look at the theory of this line. I think you'll find out it's pretty much a forced win for white, or at least a forced big advantage for white. Okay, and finally I think I'm getting it right here. It's been a long time. So then the question is, what should black do? Well, he can sacrifice an exchange, and that's the best way to go, I think. And now how does he do that? How does black sacrifice an exchange? There's something where he allows bishop here and then plays g6 and lets you take here. So it's a castles move, but you can't castle now because of this. So maybe that's why they play knight d5. Let me take a quick look. I'm recreating all this stuff. So queen g4, maybe castles right away. Maybe something like that. And then here, and takes, and then he just takes back. Yeah, and this is interesting because he's got, black has the two bishops. This might, by the way, I'm not sure if this is exactly it. You've got a threat. You have the two bishops. You have d6 to break up this center, and d6 followed by knight c6 or knight d7. And once you break up the center, you have nice center pawns, and white's behind in development, or a little bit. White's development is a little bit awkward. It's going to have to take some time to catch up. So I hope that's an answer. I think we've got the exact position. I'm not sure. But that's one of the lines. So that's kind of a breakdown of the lines, I think. This is the one that black usually tries because at least he's got some initiative. White is better here too, though, and that's why you don't see the pin variation, hardly ever. But at least here you've got fighting chances. You can make it interesting. That's the line Yasser has in his video. Oh, interesting. Okay. On the SICC channel. Ooh, I didn't know there was such a channel. I'll have to look that up. All right. Good. Well, so I guessed right. The interesting thing about that is most Sicilian lines you have options, ways to go. I think this one you really have to play the queen g4 line, or you get nothing. What else we got here? Okay, I think I've covered the chat questions. If I haven't, you can repeat one down there. And as I say, I'll cover the ones that are too broad next time. Which gives me time to do what? Well, we've actually covered we've gone an hour now. Let me just see what the next. Let me do one of these general questions. Someone asked a question that's very informative. He kind of knows the answer. I enjoy your show as well as your books. My question is regarding improving your ability to look ahead in calculation. In my personal research, there doesn't seem to be a consensus on whether it is helpful or not for players to improve their visualization and calculation separately from their general chess study, studying combinations, etc. On the one hand, some cognitive scientists who have studied these types of things, like de Groot, he says, seem to suggest that the ability to calculate ahead is related to chess knowledge and experience, and that chess players would improve this attribute by simply, although perhaps not easily, improving their chess knowledge and practice. On the other hand, there are many chess sites and players such as National Master Rolf Wetzel in his book Chess Master at Any Age, who suggests that this skill can be trained separately and should improve one's ability to visualize board positions several moves ahead. Like many things, perhaps the answer is somewhere in between, but I'm very interested in your personal opinion or experience on this topic. So see, he knows a lot about it, and you've covered the subject very well, and I would agree with everything you say. I think you did it very well. I just add a few things. Certainly I agree that it's a mix of the two. De Groot also talks about patterns, by the way, not just visualization. And so does everybody else. Patterns are key. Patterns and structures. Getting familiar with those, I think everyone agrees, is just fundamental to becoming a good chess player. A wide variety of them. Don't just get stuck in some boring, simple lines that you play every single time, or some really restricted positions, because the more you know about chess patterns in general, sometimes I think they give the figure 100,000 types of positions or something for a grandmaster, I think. I'm not sure. But of course that's out of date too, probably. The better you're going to get at calculating. Here's one reason you get better at calculating when you know types of positions and you have more experience, is you know what to look for. It's very hard to calculate when there are 30 moves, legal moves in every position. But once you get used to more and more positions, you're eliminating most of those, or at least you know what direction to sort of send your mind towards. And if you want to be creative, you can look at some strange moves, but at least you'll know when to limit them and why they probably won't work. You can handle your time better, that kind of thing. So just study alone will definitely improve your calculation. And most authors give less emphasis on visualization because it's sort of folded into their way of thinking, the way they recommend thinking techniques. But I think it's definitely worth trying to do your visualization separately. And in an earlier show, we talked about blindfold chess, which I've mentioned a couple times now to improve your visualization. I think I'm coming around to liking that idea. I'm a bit of a convert to that idea. I always wondered if that really helped much, but I think it's a fantastic idea to do some blindfold chess, either the whole game or positions that you set up, and or play against friends or whatever, and try to do calculation while you're looking to keep the position firmly in mind and visualize future positions. And so I think that's an interesting way to do it, and I guess I think separate exercises are good. I should say, though, that the best thing of all is slow play. Play that's slow, because I think, well, first of all, I think visualization can be even hurt by too much blitz play, and that's why the figures about people who play a lot of blitz and how they lose rating points comes about, I think. I think people get worse and worse at calculating and visualizing, not to mention less creative, because they have to throw out a move and they're going to throw out their first instinct every time, and so they're going to make their bad habits worse. Not that blitz is bad. I think some of it's good, and you can certainly improve your openings with blitz. But so it helps some practical skills and helps you control the clock. So it's not all bad, but it has that major disadvantages. So if you want to improve your visualization and calculation, you want to play some slow games. And of course that's true anyway. You should do a lot of playing slow. I don't know if you guys agree with that. You can always send me dissenting things. But I think young players are probably better at playing, can play more blitz. I don't think they should play a lot, but they can play quite a bit of blitz, partly because their minds are so flexible. As long as they also play slowly, I think they can adjust, go back and forth between the two more easily. But the older you get, and that means not even very old probably, the more blitz you play, online especially, of course, is where you're going to play. If you start playing thousands of those games, check out your rating beforehand and afterwards. Someone did a study on this, the people who played the most on ICC, for example, and actually found an overall decline in ratings by the people who played these, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, those kind of games. So be a little careful about that, I would say, especially if you want to get better at calculating and visualizing. And I think that's a good place to stop, because the next thing I want to talk about, a couple things: the closed Spanish systems, and I want to talk about the Evans Gambit. Because those are questions I've gotten double questions about from different sources. So you can expect that to happen next week. I'll probably start with those, or at least one of them, and those are in a little more detail. That's with some actual. Also, the Warral attack was mentioned, and I have that prepared too. So I've got a bunch of stuff that's a little maybe more serious, like serious analysis and games for next week, but I'm also looking forward to having any sort of questions and, of course, chat questions. The title of my book. Okay, which book? I have the one that I have some of the things I've talked about today, the irregular openings and things like the berry attack and things like that, is called Taming the Wild Chess Openings. That's by Eric Schiller and I. New in Chess is the publisher. And what other books? Well, I have a repertoire book for White called A Strategic Chess Opening Repertoire for White. I have a 4-volume series about openings called Mastering the Chess Opening, which essentially goes 1E4. It's a volume. They're all 300 plus pages. 1D4 is the second volume. 1C4 is the third volume. And all kinds of irregular things and philosophic thoughts, and also general subjects. I cover some of the openings I didn't cover in the first 2 volumes. Petrovs and Dutches, and I mean really a lot of them, because they fall into areas like symmetrical openings or something else, or openings that you can play that are reversed. So what I didn't cover in the first volumes, I tend to cover in that volume 4, which is actually kind of my favorite because it's got a lot of philosophy and talk in it. And I've written many, many, many other books, so I'm not sure. Oh, the French book is maybe what you were asking about. It's called Play the French 4. That might be the one you were asking about. And remember, you can go back to YouTube and look at all of this again. This will be up soon, and it's up permanently, as well as the last 20 shows, or the last however many shows we've had, all of the shows. So having said all that, and sorry to drone on so much, but just keep chatting, and we'll keep addressing those things, and send me questions. That's the main thing. The Braille next time. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the closed Spanish because of that question and one other question, but I probably won't talk too much about the Braille. I'll mention it, but I've got another idea, at least in answer to what people have asked me. If you want to ask a question about the Braille, then you'll force me to address it. So send me an email, ask.iamwatson. I'm sorry, what am I saying? Oh yeah, ask. What is wrong? What is wrong with me? What did I say? AskIamWatson@chessclub.com. I couldn't think of the ICC address. So AskIamWatson@chessclub.com, or you can message me at John L. Watson and ask me a question, maybe a little more specific would be nice. You know, ask about a certain problem you're having with the Braille or a certain variation of it. Because if you just ask me, talk about the Braille, well, you know, how impossible is that? 20,000 games and all the masters in history have played that. So, recommend how to help low raters get better quickly. Well, yeah, we've talked about that, and I will do that. I could even say right away that there's no secret thing. The main thing is playing a lot and studying a lot. As Caro-Kann said, make sure you study a lot. Some players just play a lot. We've talked about what to study, and we've talked about a lot about these things, but I will maybe answer that again next time. I'll address that. But basically just immerse yourself as much as you can, and don't forget to study as systematically as you can. And it matters what is fun. Study what's fun. And if you enjoy doing exercises, you can do exercises. I wouldn't overwhelm myself with tactical exercises the way some people do, but you should do some of them. End games are always great. But to get better quickly is a funny thing. I think the only way that it goes quickly is if you do more work, including play and study. It's the only way. Otherwise, there's no magic. And it'll turn out that if you have a natural aptitude for chess, or if you're just on the verge of a breakthrough anyway, maybe it will happen quickly. But if not, it'll just happen consistently. And I can almost guarantee you won't get worse. And how do I analyze Grandmaster games? Okay, so since we're already way late, or we've gone over the normal limit anyway, I'm going to sign off, but I'm going to copy these games. So I will, these chat questions, and I will therefore have them for next week, and I'll try to answer as many of them as possible. Remember, anything I don't get to, including last week and the week before, I've got them listed, so I'll probably eventually get to those things. All right, thanks everybody. Hope you enjoyed it, and remember, AskIamWatson@chessclub.com, and send me your questions and comments. And you might even remember that thing about books, and think about what books you love and think are, if not essential, at least wonderful to read. I think it's nice to get some talk going about that. Thanks very much. Bye.